Ubisoft wants its core gameplay hook, the ability to recruit anyone in the open world, to be the thing that makes you play Watch Dogs Legion. Unfortunately, the mechanic wears out its welcome relatively quickly, and the more time I spent with the game, the less impressive it became. The veil lifted further and further to show the system's rough edges. The real reason to play Watch Dogs Legion revolves around its incredibly well-realized London, one of the best open worlds I have ever explored in a video game. But buyer beware, the PC version of the title is littered with issues, making the experience on console the preferable choice. Watch Dogs Legion opens with attacks on key London landmarks that are pinned on the hacker group DedSec, which push the city to hand over the keys to its security to private military corporation Albion. As the game unfolds, the player will uncover the mystery behind Zero Day, the actual perpetrators of the bombings, and how the villainous factions of London tie into them. Watch Dogs has always skirted around the edges of reality, with its commentary on surveillance, but Legion dives in the deep end by adding a healthy dollop of oppressive policing. It wasn't lost on me that the last game in the series, Watch Dogs 2, released right around the last US presidential election, something the repercussions of which has constantly reshaped not only my personal politics, but the state of the world on a near daily basis. As such, I was hoping that the game would find something interesting to say about its content, but topics that should be approached with a scalpel are instead tackled with a sledgehammer. The game has absolutely zero subtlety or astuteness, and in order to preserve the light-hearted nature that made Watch Dogs 2 so popular, the game is a tonal mess. As Bagley, the AI companion that accompanies your operative on their missions, cracks jokes, you're forced to take pictures of organ-harvested corpses found in the middle of a sports stadium that has been converted into a concentration camp. The game never once comes to terms with the very real and horrifying situations it portrays, and positioning them against a hacker group with infinite resources and limitless influence at no point gelled with me, leaving me feel uneasy about the entire state of the game's story. I, like many people, had been intrigued by the game's mechanic of walking up to anyone in London and recruiting them as part of DedSec. While at first it feels novel, it ends up failing to justify its existence, and the lack of a main character only becomes more problematic as the game progresses. After playing the prologue mission, which will start off everyone as the same operative, the game gives you a choice of 15 different randomly generated characters to choose from. You are provided their name, their profession, a single sentence on their background, and what tool or ability they come with. My choice was Marcel, a repairman with a wrench that provided additional melee damage. From the jump, you are able to approach nearly anyone on the street and recruit them to the cause. I say nearly anyone, because around 75% of the civilians actually had the Start Recruitment pop-up appear over their head at any given time. Unsure if this was a bug, or the game will only let you recruit a certain amount of characters at once. Regardless, it's still enough people that I didn't feel like Ubisoft had falsely advertised the mechanic. You can vet recruits by bringing up the same information as I was provided for Marcel when I chose him, and depending on their feeling towards DedSec, you will need to complete a side quest of varying difficulty in order to join them. Once they do, you are able to swap between operatives at any time. There will be points in the campaign where you are tasked with recruiting a specific operative for a mission, like a construction worker, in order to access a worksite undetected, and the game will eventually mark the map with recruits that bring more unique skills to the table. The tragedy is that while initially the mechanic is fun, playing the game only reveals how simple it really is, and at times problematic. It seems that civilians that inhabit the world are essentially random character creations, all sharing similar attributes. I would often run around as an operative and bump into people with the same haircut or beard as my character. I even ran into a recruit that had the same face as Marcel, but it was as if the skin color slider on a character creator was set to its darkest setting, which didn't sit right with me at all. In addition, some of the randomized visual and vocal matchups meant that most of the characters didn't look or act like real people, further taking me out of the world. On top of all this, the majority of operatives all play the same. There are some exceptions, with my spy character having a handful more combat animations than the rest of my crew, and the ability to spawn an Aston Martin car with rockets and cloaking. Most of the time, however, I could have swapped out any of my recruits for another, and it wouldn't have actually made a difference. My construction worker could call in a cargo drone to clamber on top of and fly around the city, but there were enough of them zipping around the sky as it is, or landing pads that any character could call one to, that this was barely a useful ability. As you unlock more hacking and combat upgrades for your crew, the differences between your recruits only further diminishes, and I would hazard to say, if the game only had a single protagonist to play as, it wouldn't have made a meaningful difference to the experience in the way it's supposed to. In fact, having a main character, or even a few rotatable protagonists, I think would have served the story a lot better. We could have connected with them in a way that's impossible with the random recruits, and a message beyond "fascism is bad" could have been gleaned from the story. The game tries to anchor you with its side characters, including the often amusing AI Bagley, but they are often poor substitutes for a consistent main character. The majority of this review has been incredibly critical of the game, mainly because I'm disappointed in the way that it tackles its story and the characters within it. However, if you are someone that is simply looking to jump into an Ubisoft open-world sandbox, Watch Dogs Legion is the company's best effort to date. The London they've built for the game is a delight to explore, particularly as someone that grew up in England and has visited the capital on numerous occasions. When walking around, you might also run into other operatives that you've recruited, and select members of the public will be highlighted with info if they're somehow related to a recruit, like a sibling or their doctor. While I'm overtly lukewarm on the whole recruit anyone mechanic, I appreciated this simple touch to flesh it out a little bit more. When I was able to turn on ray tracing, the reflections in puddles or in the side of a double-decker bus truly brought a texture to the world that I had never seen before or experienced in a game. It's at times grimy, at times shiny, and at times homey, depending on what part of town you're in, and feels like the game is made out of a completely 3D mapped city. I say when I'm able to turn on ray tracing, as often my game would have significant performance issues on PC. I tested out the game on my new LG CX OLED screen I purchased in preparation for the new consoles. Running it at 4K on high settings, with some ray tracing turned on, the game ran at a desirable 60 frames per second. However, it would inevitably always crash, whether a few minutes into the game or a half hour. I was told by an Ubisoft representative to make sure I had the most up-to-date GeForce drivers and to check the spec requirements of the game. I did indeed have the latest drivers installed, which I reinstalled for safe measure. While I didn't have the 3080 graphics card that the settings I was trying to run it at asked for, even the most demanding of games I've played prior to Watch Dogs Legion ran without issues at even higher settings and higher frame rates. In addition, it's not like the game would run poorly. I'd be playing at a consistent 60 frames per second, and then it would just crash, forcing me to restart. I eventually reduced my resolution to 1800p, which prevented future shutdowns, but that is not normal behavior for a game. Most unfortunately of all, I was running the game with its day one patch. I've been made aware a hotfix for bugs on consoles is dropping on October 30th, and a more robust second patch to squash performance issues will be coming November 9th. Hopefully, those will address the problems. The aforementioned new cargo drones that allow you to fly around the city brings a new level of verticality to the game, allowing for more ways to enter a restricted area, a welcome addition as entering restricted areas is 90% of Watch Dogs' entire bag. That being said, using a cargo drone was sometimes like playing the game on easy mode, as often the server or other objective I had to access was located on a roof. The game is made even more effortless by the moronic enemy AI. The city is littered with Albion drones and guards, and yet I was able to cause an awful lot of mayhem without a peep from the fuzz. And when they did catch me in the act, ducking behind a corner or two very quickly turned their awareness meter from attack red to befuddled white, and within 30 seconds, chatter of giving up the chase would come through on the mic with very little effort on my part. Hard mode doesn't make them any smarter, just more deadly, and there's a permadeath mode which means if an operative dies, they're gone for good. Even with all this turned on, the difficulty of the game never feels challenging. Watch Dogs Legion is Ubisoft's most ambitious entry in the series yet, and while it doesn't quite disappoint like the first Watch Dogs, it feels perhaps the most aimless. Those that like exploring and messing around in an open world will find quite a bit to enjoy, but those attracted to the promise of the title's main gameplay hook, I feel will leave disappointed.